So let's dive right in, guys. I want to really address head on some of the new changes that we're experiencing now that we're in a COVID world. Virtual cinemas, virtual festivals. We're at a virtual festival right now. We have distributors creating new services like Kino's Theater Marquee and Film Movement and South by Southwest, partnering with Amazon Prime, and all sorts of stuff happening very quickly, which I'm sure can be very dizzying for filmmakers to decide, what do I do and when do I do it? So I actually wanted to get sort of a fresh perspective on someone who actually experienced this with a film that was in a film festival before COVID, all erupted and changed everything, and kind of walk us through your experience. And I'd actually maybe call on you, Loira. You had your fabulous film that ITVS co-produced, Through the Night, really set up to make a big splash at Tribeca. We all had high hopes. I'd love to hear your personal take on going into a really splashy premiere at Tribeca, and then your experience when seeing and learning that this might not happen. Tribeca Festival might not go through. What do I do now? Would you mind kind of walking us through that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So yeah, for us, we were super excited about Tribeca as a sort of launching pad, primarily for me because I am a New Yorker and our story is a New York story. And premiering at Tribeca would allow for everyone that is part of the community in the film. The film is about a 24-hour daycare center just outside of New York City in New Rochelle. It would have allowed for not only our protagonists, but also the entire community to be a part of the release, which was very much how I wanted to usher the film out into the world, ensuring that the people that it's about, and that many ways whom I made it for, were part of the launch from the very beginning. And then obviously all the other pieces, right, that a premiere at a festival like Tribeca can help with, right, with press, with sales, with buzz, with all the sort of other things that, the kind of the synergies that happen at the kind of big film festivals in the country. Looking forward to that. And then COVID-19 hit. And, I've sort of shared this before in other spaces, but because I am Black, I'm Latina, I'm from the Bronx, I grew up in a low-income community, my entire community, including my family, quickly was really directly impacted by COVID-19. So we had family members sick, my mother, my sister both got sick, aunts, cousins, friends, childhood friends lost parents. I mean, it was like a whirlwind. While, our industry, I felt in many ways, our spaces were already quickly talking about a new normal, and there was a big rush around, let's do surveys to understand how filmmakers are impacted, and rapid response grants, and all this stuff, and film festivals figuring out what they were going to do, some being more transparent and communicative with filmmakers than others, which is something I would like to talk about a little bit. But for me, a lot of that time, I was really caught up in the whirlwind of COVID-19. Two of my sisters lost their jobs. So while our industry was, sort of having whatever conversation it was having, I was drowning in COVID-19 stuff, and which for me was a moment of understanding, like, just how little this industry and field that I am a part of actually looks like me, and that how people that are like me and come from communities like mine are not represented enough, and I've known this, my work at Firelight Media is around supporting filmmakers of color and pushing critical, conversations about race and class and all these things. But in this pandemic moment, it was like, oh, right, like people are talking about a new normal and, worried about, new recipes for banana bread and Netflix shows that they're binge watching because they have the luxury to, because they're not from these communities, right, that are disproportionately impacted. And it just kind of hit me in this very like personal, enraging sort of way, which then also, then for me extended to this conversation around distribution. And personally, what it created for me was a lot of frustration around the kinds of conversation that festivals were having, how little they were involving filmmakers in those conversations, and still are, right? So a lot of what you prefaced was, Kino Lorber doing this and Amazon doing that and so doing that. And filmmakers, and certainly filmmakers of color, are not a part of any of those conversations. No one is communicating with us transparently or honestly, which, if anything, it's like, I feel like that's what the lessons that we've learned, in this moment around like our survival, is that it requires like deep transparency, honesty, accountability. But in many ways, the business sides of our industry are very much moving along business as usual and making decisions that really are just about their bottom lines, which is very frustrating. And so I'm caught in this place of, yes, trying to figure out what to do around my particular film, because I do feel that in some ways the film is even more timely than I could have ever imagined, because all the folks in the film are essential workers, and it's a view into just how unjust things were even before the pandemic that certainly hopefully can inform our understanding throughout this pandemic, and inform our path forward. So it's very timely. And so I am concerned, obviously, on an individual level about what to do, surrounding my film. But at the same time, I'm also consumed with the frustration and the rage that I think needs to be directed at our industry, that demands that our industry undergo a reckoning like every other sector of our society is currently being forced to do. And we've had a lot of very lovely, and I believe heartfelt solidarity statements from a lot of gatekeepers and institutions and corporations in our space. But I'm really worried that that's where they're going to end, because I don't hear people talking about, changing any of these business models that were already opaque and unjust and unfair before, and could potentially just become even more so now. So that's where I'm sort of caught up in, like, yes, I care about my personal film, but I also feel like this is a moment of like organizing, right? And, this idea of like, Frederick Douglass said, like, power concedes nothing without a demand. And so I'm also really thinking about what are the collective demands, and who do we direct them at, and trying to stay sane and parent my two children in between all of that.
First, thank you, Loida, for that honesty, that injection of, guys, wake up, there's a larger conversation that needs to be had here. And also, I'm so sorry to hear about all the sort of tragedy that's happened, and the effects, the direct effects of COVID on you and your family and your community. This is the first that I am hearing about this for you and you, us being connected by your film and our organizations. I'm very sad to hear that it has affected you and your family so deeply, and you're absolutely right. I think that not intentionally, we all just reacted and thought, okay, what can we do with our films to and so let's and I'll call myself out. Let me go back in my film catalog and bring back films that can help the community understand without thinking, wait a second, are they okay? First off, are they okay? Are they need supplies? Do they need support? But so on and so forth. Not just what can my business sort of brain do. So thank you for that nice wake-up call for myself and hopefully for others out there on the business side listening, and then also the filmmakers. Please take note of, I think, Loira's bravery and honesty to sort of wake people up and refocus. So I had a whole list of questions before this, before getting into the diversity, but I think you've opened up a really great field for us to go down. And let's continue to walk down that path. I would say that COVID and then the events after the murder of George Floyd, I saw a flurry of activity on the business side of film and television, seeking stories and filmmakers about race, about anyone, any filmmaker of color, a story about a Black community being oppressed or Black community of color, so on and so forth. On one end, that was really nice. It was good to see that there was opportunities for these films to get a second window, so to speak, again, with my business hat on, where they would get a new licensing deal, and that second window licensing deal, still trying to keep this in the distribution lens, but a film will go out, it will premiere, it'll go through its first and second year life cycle of windowing, and then there's like a catalog life where your film can continue to make money by being a part of catalog releases and new catalog licensing deals. So there was that. But this made me think about, oh, this is where and now and how these stories are now a new level of value and valuable, is when there is tragedy out there, and then again that response is, let's just get a film to fix it. Let's put a film out there, and that's when I want to spend money to bring it back or interview the filmmaker or whatever that might be. So I'd like to maybe look at any Lois or Matt or even Beth, if you have any thoughts around this. How is our industry supporting and looking at filmmakers of color outside of an event like a George Floyd, when we need to something like that happens in the community or in our nation? And I think also to Matt, the connection that you have to distributors and platforms, how are they looking at filmmakers of color or stories of color in their slates? Do you see that demand growing? Do you see that interest and demand growing? And who are the decision makers behind that?
It's a difficult question. I think certainly, at this moment, we have one or two titles we're working on that deal either directly or peripherally with civil rights issues, and have certainly gotten new attention in the light of everything that's happening recently. So I think that, in times of uncertainty or peril or whatever it is, film distribution companies are going to look to what they do. They release films. Is there a film that they can have about that subject or that world? As far as like an overall, there's some channels that, look for quote unquote like Black or brown programming specifically, but we don't often run into like mandates specifically of we're looking for X, Y, or Z. And that's never really how we approach our decision-making process either, where we are totally like film forward. So if we sort of connect to the film or love the project, we go after it. We don't kind of have a specific mandate for anything like that. I don't know if that was...
No, I think that, these are right out the gate, difficult conversations, but important conversations that are part, of the distribution world. And let's just call it how it is. There aren't specific mandates. but there is an increase in interest. You see interests increasing as current events change out in the world, and that has always been the case. You know, during a 9/11 anniversary or anything like that, people are looking for that content. During something that happens in South America, people are looking for that content. And I think that you just being open and honest and showing where there are maybe opportunities for business folks of color and makers and artists of color, maybe there's somewhere that they can be injected into those decision makings around programming. Or I think there was one other thing that you mentioned, Loida, which was transparency, which is, I think, even outside of even more so for people of color, but independent makers, it is very difficult to get transparency around numbers and performance from all the platforms. So we can maybe start to move into that space.
I'm curious, Loira, when you said that about transparency, what were you specifically talking about? That you want the decision makers, for example, at festivals, to engage with the filmmakers more about what they're planning, or to actually reach out to the filmmakers and say, what do you need? And Beth, this is for both Loira and Beth. What does that look like for you if people were to respond differently?
You want to go first, Loida?
You should go. You haven't spoken yet.
No, well, you know, it's been a really interesting moment. So, you know, I guess I do want to I just do want to acknowledge, thank you, Loida, for being so honest. And it does bring discomfort into the conversation, perhaps to raise all these issues. But I think that, like, we have to be uncomfortable, and that's the only way that we're going to have change. You know, I think in terms of the film festival front, you know, it's really interesting. And one thing that was not in my bio is I'm one of the co-founders of the Documentary Producers Alliance, and we've been really struggling with, or not struggling with, but asking ourselves, like, what should be the role of filmmakers in film festivals? And traditionally, we send out our films, and then we find out if we get accepted, and the film festivals kind of have their whole programming and their slate, and we're just sort of told, like, sort of where we fit in. But it is a new milieu, and it is an opportunity for us to close a gap that has long existed between filmmakers and festivals. And I found throughout the course of my career that often film festivals don't really know what filmmakers need. And filmmakers similarly don't know the challenges that film festivals face in programming their slates or running their festivals. And so we are in this new moment. And I think it's really important that we close this gap, because there are, you know, film festivals were an issue around access. So traditionally, not all filmmakers could go to necessarily all the film festivals. People talk about that Sundance, it costs them, if they made a short, more for them to go to Sundance than for them to even make the film. That keeps a lot of filmmakers out of being able to attend certain film festivals and build those relationships and make those connections that make film festivals really crucial to what we do. So, you know, in this moment, we can't gather, we can't meet a programmer or a distributor at a coffee shop or in line at a movie. You know, in this moment, I can't bump into Loida and find out what she's thinking and what she's struggling with. So, you know, losing physical film festivals, I think, is a loss in some ways. At the same time, it's a tremendous gain. We can reach audiences, we can reach people that probably couldn't make it to certain festivals, couldn't afford the travel. And so it's this really interesting moment where perhaps we're providing more access through film festivals. We can reach wider, less expensively, greater access. But I think filmmakers really are struggling in this moment, how like, well, or questioning, will virtual film festivals work in the way that I might need them, or that we might need them to? At the same time, brick and mortar film festivals really presented issues around access. And I'm just kind of talking about access in a limited, in a more, probably a limited way that I think Loida might expand on. But it would be great if in this moment there could be more dialogue with filmmakers and festivals, because I think each would learn a lot from each other, and we'd really figure out ways to make this new milieu, if it's going to be a new milieu, work better for everybody.
Yeah, and I would just add to that for example, you know, what I've been running into as I try to have conversations with sales agents or festival programmers, you know, primarily is the sense of they are all uncertain and somehow paralyzed by a number of constraints that I don't understand. That's what I mean by transparency. It's like filmmakers, we don't know, we don't have access. This part of the industry around distribution is shrouded in mystery for filmmakers. We don't understand what the relationships, what the terms are, for example, between festivals and critics, you know, or the trades, and how the festival might be limited because of whatever relationship, you know, or agreement they have in place with Variety and the Hollywood Reporter, you know, and Hollywood Reporter is doing one thing and Variety's doing another, and the festivals, you know, making decisions based on that, or they're making decisions based on what, you know, Submarine might be telling them, what intel Submarine might be giving them, or what Netflix may or may not do, right? And it's like, there are all these gatekeepers that, you know, move with a lot of discretionary power in normal times, right? They're not public facing, they're corporations, right? For the most part. So they don't have, like Matt just said, there's no mandate, right? Like, it's like shareholders is the kind of mandate, right? And so there's a lot of, yeah, it's very opaque even before this. And then when you're in a moment like this, where you are trying to figure out as a filmmaker, what do I do with this thing? And you start to hear like, this lever can't be moved without this lever, without that lever, without that lever, but you have no insight into what, you know, what the relationships between all those levers are. It becomes very, very frustrating as a filmmaker to understand that, like, or to feel, I'll speak for myself, to feel like there's this industry that could not exist without you and your work, but you are at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of power. And so that's what I mean in terms of transparency. That's been my experience, like really concretely trying to figure out, you know, from week to week, what can we do? What can't we do? You know, in our case, we have a film that we feel like we would like to get out now. We don't want to wait, you know, forever. We want to reach audiences now. The film can help people as they're processing this moment and building analysis around the systems and structures in the society. So we think it's an important film to get to audiences now, but we're running into conversations where like it seems like everybody is like, you know, has a gag over their mouth because they're waiting for some other power broker to make a decision. So yeah.
And if I can just piggyback on that, I mean, one place, what I think also you're getting to, Loida, is, and I don't know this, and Matt and maybe Lois, you can help, but are film festivals talking to distributors in this new milieu? Because I know so many filmmakers are feeling paralyzed. Should they do the virtual film festivals, or is it going to jeopardize their distribution future? And to me, that says distributors and film festivals need to be talking so that filmmakers don't feel so at risk. They've already risked so much making their films. They want to get the films out there, but they are feeling really nervous. So I'm speaking to all these filmmakers who are holding their films back for fear that it'll have repercussions down the line. But if distributors and film festivals could get on the same page with filmmakers, maybe we could, again, find this so that we're not imperiling filmmakers and their films, you know?
Yeah, I mean, for me, what I've seen over the years, over the many years, when I started at Sundance in 1990, there were a few sales reps, but by and large, filmmakers represented their own films. And of course, back then, there weren't as many outlets buying documentaries, so films weren't as much a market as they are now. They really were a place where you were looking to exhibit your film. You wanted an audience to come and build some press. And I've seen over the last 20, 30 years, how that has changed so dramatically. And it does really speak to a shift in the business. The plus side is that there are many more outlets, and there is the opportunity for some revenue, which is where people like Matt come in. You know, their job is to help figure out that model for the filmmakers. But there are so many filmmakers, to your point, Loira, who don't have a sales agent, who may not even want a sales agent, but are kind of then in this sort of sea of unknown, you know, where you don't have access to any of that information. And so I can see how that has definitely happened. I mean, I'm looking at sort of Matt, wondering if there's, and not to put this on Matt, but it seems like there's an opportunity for festivals to actually think about using their forum, especially in this virtual world, as a way to close that gap, to actually help empower the filmmakers to understand the distribution world, the ins and outs of the distribution world in a different way, rather than to just come to the festival sort of hoping that they will get seen, if that makes sense. To
Right.
literally rethink the role of the festival in the life of a documentary.
Well, I think that's why like things like this are essential, and other festivals have, you know, one-on-one mentorship programs that myself and my colleagues attend as well. I guess kind of going back through all those points, like to start at the festival, I mean, since the shutdown, I think everybody was moving so quickly to figure out what they were going to do. Like that first kind of wave of festivals that went online, we were very, maybe out of an overabundance of caution, resistant to. Like we didn't want films we were working on showing on, you know, quote unquote, like transactional platforms online, which could in some ways be deemed a commercial release of the film. It's this gray area between what the festival traditionally is and selling the film to the public. So we pulled all films we were working on from a number of festivals. I think now, as the months have gone on, some of the bigger ones have been working with distributors a bit more just to kind of feel out what the comfort levels are for people. But we've had, you know, like for instance, the South by Southwest Amazon thing, like we heard from a few distributors, like if your film goes on that, we are no longer interested in it. And these other ones where they're geo-blocking or only selling a certain amount of tickets, I mean, it's good to constrain, but we've been holding off on a lot of them. And then I guess once you kind of move through that stage, I mean, opportunistically, a lot of all rights distributors are just moving to digital releases of films right now because they can't do theatrical, but you know, it's difficult to see if somebody's just trying to snatch something up because they want content, because they're trying to make money in this time, or if they really love the film. So it's I mean, it's kind of ever shifting sands, even outside of an environment like COVID. Like the distribution landscape looks different every 6 months. Like we never know what the next year's market is going to look like. We never know what the next festival's market's going to look like, as much as we pretend to be prognosticators. So it's, I think with all of this stuff thrown on top, I think we're all just reeling a bit from all facets of the film industry and the nation at large, and trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I do think that, Matt, the point is true that with the first festivals, I mean, we obviously had a lot of our films that were scheduled to premiere at, you know, True False and Full Frame and, you know, Hot Docs and on and on. And to your point, Beth and Loira, watching the filmmakers go through that abrupt, you know, sea change was painful, because filmmakers had been spending years of their life making these films and had really looked to that as the place they were going to finally meet their first audience. So a lot of painful conversations, and there was no clear answer. I mean, we would look at these contracts that were coming in, and our business affairs person would say, to Matt's point, I don't think you should do that. I mean, you're literally going to lose your opportunity to an SVOD deal. And then other festivals had a much more narrow approach. And with those, we were like, yes, please go forward. This seems like it will work. It actually serves the role of a festival, but in a virtual environment. But I think the sands are ever shifting. And to me, it is an opportunity for filmmakers to use this to get that transparency, to literally say to festivals, I'm interested, but what does it mean? I mean, to literally say, what does that mean for this festival? I always tell filmmakers, you actually have a little bit more power than you think you have, because you have what people want, which is the film. And if they want your film, you actually do have the ability to ask questions at the very least. And I think it takes, as what we've seen in the last 3 weeks, it takes sort of pushing back to realize that you can ask those questions, perhaps, without as big a risk as it may seem to you.
Thank
Can
you.
I ask? I'm wondering, because you just said, Lois, there are these opportunities. I'm wondering, from a filmmaker asking, Matt and Lois, if what do you think are the opportunities right now for filmmakers, that are releasing this year? Like, what are the things that we should be thinking about or advocating for from your, respective vantage points? Because I think you both have a really interesting, sort of bird's eye view, maybe from slightly different vantage points.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear what Matt has to say, and I will supplement Matt since he gets to talk to.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways a film can be released, right? So if it's something that's anchored, like your film with a broadcast deal, then it's maybe you have an opportunity, in light of theaters not being around, to have more of a digital exposure for the film, or go back to somebody you've done a deal with and ask, for a good faith change in some of those terms to reflect the reality of the situation. Across the board I guess I'm trying to understand a bit more, what do you mean? What do you would be asking for?
That's what I would say, Matt, with the question, the way I would, and maybe Loira, you mean something different, but there was a period, for example, when Netflix was acquiring a lot of docs. And that was a great time because they were taking a lot of docs. They obviously have pivoted to a different strategy. I thought somebody else would step into that void. But as we know, social issue docs don't always make money. So I'm curious, Matt, if you see, and I'm literally asking this out of curiosity, do you see anybody in the digital space, any of the major streamers or some of the smaller, expanding their appetite for docs? Or do you think that that isn't actually happening right now?
It's a weird time in the market because it's very feast or famine. We're seeing films go for record numbers and really huge deals, and we're seeing a lot of films go for nothing or very small advances or digital deals. So there's been almost this death of the middle class of these deals that weren't millions of dollars, but we're getting films recouped, we're getting real distribution, and it's harder and harder to find those because, to your point, this the pullback of the streaming services from licensing independent content. Now, from a transparency perspective, we never know how they're making, these data-driven companies are making their decisions. We'll get passes on our films from Netflix and Hulu and Amazon, and they'll just say oh, we had some comps, we looked at the numbers. No. And we never understand at all what that is. We don't see how they performed in the past or those other films have performed that they're comparing these against. So, without a strong anchor deal for a film, it's difficult, and it's difficult for a distributor to take a financial risk on releasing a film theatrically, even in the best of times, without having a broadcast or a streaming partner that they know they're going to be insulating their risk through?
What it seems to me is happening, and I could be wrong, but from where I sit, which is, you know, to your point, Loira, I do see a certain overview, but then it's also somewhat limited. But it feels to me that most of the large companies are buying 1 or 2 docs, and it's an awards play. They're actually like, this is our doc that we're going to put up for Oscar consideration, and then whatever, you know. And it's not that they don't love that doc or believe in that doc, but that it's a strategy to use 1 or 2 docs to elevate or create buzz around their brand, as opposed to, you know, wanting a large catalog of docs or wanting a steady drumbeat of docs. That's what it seems like in the moment. And, you know, I don't know how we tackle that. I don't know, you know, I honestly don't know what the answer is for that. But to Matt's point, it does create this dramatically schizophrenic marketplace where a couple of docs sell for literally tens of millions of dollars. And then I myself, you know, to Matt's point, see films that I personally think are brilliant films not getting any deal or getting very small deals. And so then you add to that the systemic racism that Loira, you spoke about at the top, like who literally even gets to get the money to make a doc, then who gets the money to go to a festival. You know, I mean, it is really a reckoning, to your point, that our industry has a lot of work to do if we're going to talk about being sort of, you know, progressive. We are still flattening out the voices that actually get to come through.
Guys, this is such a fantastic conversation. It's flowing so well. I hate to interrupt. I just want to quickly announce to the panelists and to the audience that we have about less than 15 minutes left, and I had a few audience questions come in. So if you want a question to hopefully get in, start sending your questions over, and AFI will send them my way, and we'll see how much we can get in within this sort of very limited time. Wow, I can't believe the time has flown so quickly. I hate to interrupt that flow, but I want to make sure that we kind of keep
questions. Go for questions.
Yeah, keep kind of hitting as much as we can on this insanely broad topic. We'll go to a question. So one question is, Beth, where do you see post-COVID an opportunity that works in terms of grants and distribution that you would recommend to the audience? And I wanted to just quickly say that, Beth, I love working with you. We've worked on numerous projects through our different companies. You have many films that have complete and gone through their first window and second window pre-COVID. You have films in production that are now in the COVID world. You have one that was supposed to premiere as COVID was happening, and then others in so you have a couple films in all the stages. So I'd love to, you know, being inspired by this great question, what are you seeing now post-COVID in terms of opportunities for grants, distribution for all of the films that you have happening during this time?
Yeah, well, I don't think this is so we're talking about now. I don't think this is post-COVID. I think we are still in the middle of COVID. So I think that's why also there are just so many unknowns. I think I have as many questions as anybody else does in some ways because of that. You know, I'll just speak about maybe, so is it better to, I mean, I can talk about like the experience that I'm having with Women in Blue, or I can talk about what I'm seeing on the periphery. What's more helpful?
Really kind of precise case.
So like Loida, Women in Blue was supposed to premiere at Tribeca. We were really gearing up for that. We were really excited about that for many of the reasons that Loida talked about vis-a-vis her film. We had long had the film lined up as the closing night film of the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Film Festival. Importantly, Women in Blue is about gender, race, and violence through the eyes of female police officers with the Minneapolis Police Department. So the film premiered on the Saturday night before Memorial Day as the closing night film of the virtual version of the Minneapolis St. Paul International Film Festival. And then 2 days later, George Floyd was killed. And it's just really hard to describe. In my career, I've never been in the middle of such a national event, you know, that we made this film about the Minneapolis Police Department. It's almost like the prequel to everything that's happening now. And so one thing that I'm really, you know, I think we really struggled, and we're struggling still. I mean, we want to get the film out there because we think the film can help start a conversation that maybe incremental reform is not possible, but that maybe more women and especially women of color could have a role in public safety moving forward. But I think we're trying to figure out, well, what is the right time to start this conversation? How can we respect like all the grieving and the pain and the turmoil that people are going through, not just in Minneapolis, but nationally, and yet launch a conversation that has never been had around gender in public safety. So it's been really interesting how to be sensitive to what is really going on that's so real and so painful, and yet and yet when is it the right time to maybe have a conversation, because the film has something to offer that conversation. So it's just been, so for that film, it's been a really interesting moment. And I think the other challenge for us is that we finished filming in June of 2019, and these major events have now happened. And we're talking about needing to update the film to bring it more into this moment and even more relevant. And yet, how do we do that? And what does that mean in terms of fundraising? And so we're really grappling with many questions, and I think we're sort of playing it day by day, like one day at a time. And so we're really happy the film is screening starting at midnight tonight with the AFI docs, and we want to see how that goes and how that conversation goes. And we're also thinking about our subjects and you know, wanting to make sure that they feel safe and not exploited in any way or put at risk in any way in this moment. So, you know, it's interesting because we have a real opportunity, not vis-a-vis COVID, I would say, but there's a national conversation happening now. And yet, when is the right time for us to raise our voice in that conversation? Other people might need to have a voice now. So, you know, and then I'm doing, you know, and so it's interest. So that's my sort of Women in Blue example. And I think I've had my head down so much in the past 3 weeks, just struggling kind of personally and professionally with this intersection of events that, like, for filmmakers out there who are like, what opportunities are out there in terms of funding? I'm not really sure, to be honest. I know that there was the Keeping the Lights On grant, which was a $10K grant. And I know that Perspective Fund is doing something. And I just think now, like everybody else, funders, programmers, just everybody, I mean, we're all humans behind these institutions. So everybody's just trying to figure out, you know, what do we do now? What's ethical, what's safe? Who do we support in this moment? There's so many people that need support in this moment. So yeah, does that kind of answer that? Yeah. Oh,
Loira.
Can I jump in on that? Just from the perspective of like concrete resources, POV does a really great job of collecting and listing deadlines for every grant that exists and every fellowship and residency. So for filmmakers that are, you know, in this conversation, you know, please look at the POV website. I believe Doc Society also has a pretty robust resources page, and those are updated with all the different, there's been a lot of rapid response COVID-19 grants that have been launched. So that as a concrete resource. And then I also saw, I was looking through the questions as well, and I saw that somebody asked around like the question of how to harness audiences in this moment, different ways to reach audiences. And then I think it piggybacks off of what Beth was saying. For us, one thing that also became clear to me was in this sort of whole milieu was that no matter what, in order to reach the audiences that the film is really about, and that I made it, thinking primarily about in terms of audiences, and I'm being, to be really specific, I'm thinking about Black and Latinx, poor and working class mothers, single mothers, working mothers, caregivers, this kind of universe of people that the film is about and that the film is for, that I also knew that I would have to do my own work to reach those audiences anyway. You don't necessarily reach those audiences automatically at Tribeca or even inherently through a PBS broadcast. Like it always entails a whole other range of, impact and engagement activities to bring these communities to any of these sort of film spaces. And that's always been the case. That's not just, now. And so for us, what we have done in terms of thinking about like what to prioritize and how to connect to audiences was to go back to our protagonists. One, just from like a personal human point of view, like Beth was saying, like they are all essential workers. The daycare has remained open throughout COVID-19 because they care for the children of essential workers. So it was like, how are you doing? What do you need? Is there anything that we can do to help? The film hasn't really gotten out there, but we have like this much of a platform. We're more than happy to use it to support you. And so what that quickly turned into was the realization that daycare providers that are caring for the children of essential workers need access to like rapid response monies so that they can provide all the many different things that they're providing for communities. And in a lot of communities, these kinds of centers are the safety net that society should provide, but doesn't. And in this moment, they're increasingly that safety net, but they're not getting the small business loans. They're not getting access to all these things. They're struggling themselves. They're trying to meet the multitude of needs that families have in this moment. And so we launched a GoFundMe, which is still, this is like a plug right now. It's still up. It's called the Essential Care Fundraiser. It's on GoFundMe. You can find information about it on our website. It's throughthenightfilm.com. And this is a pool of money that we're raising, which will be given out to hopefully about 10 different daycare centers in the New York area that are currently caring for the children of essential workers. The distribution of the monies will be determined by a committee of providers and parents. So, with the thinking that like the people that are most directly impacted are actually the experts that have the solutions and should be, deciding how resources are distributed. So I would encourage folks to, support this, donate, help us spread the word. So all that to say, I say it as a plug, but also as a concrete example of the way in which like thinking about the participants in a film as the audience and that commitment that you've made to them as we move through this moment, that is also an opportunity, right? To continue thinking about like, what are the ways that this film can serve the people that it's about and the people that it's for. And a lot of that, can be done not outside of the formal industry spaces, and certainly for communities of color, it is always done outside of industry spaces. So that's how we've been sort of thinking, and we are moving forward with some things and parts of our engagement campaign that don't rely on the traditional industry routes.
I think that's a really great point, and to use what you're doing as an example. I mean, we always find that when we're working with the filmmaker, the smart ones identify their audience throughout the whole process when they're making a film and are building that audience from the beginning, right? Because docs are a word of mouth medium, people talk about them. So when you do have a strongly identified audience and you're building grassroots and you have clear goals for the film, that makes, like, that's the opportunities you have when you're going to the distribution sphere, because so many companies care about different things, even the all rights distributors. Some might be far more fixated on educational, or some might be far more fixated on advertised driven VOD. But if you have a really clear set of goals, you can go in and negotiate most any deal to achieve your goals. And some companies are more strident on their rules, but I mean, there's always wiggle room in most of the things. So I would say, like, as like blanket advice, to continue to identify your audience and really, really know exactly what you want, beyond clearly recouping a film's budget and being able to make more films, obviously. But, you know, each film, especially documentaries, has their own kind of life direction and goals. So knowing those is of paramount importance.
I would say that's probably the one thing within distribution and filmmaking that will remain the same.
More so.
Understanding your audience, no matter what your goal is, to create impact, to generate money, to get awards. You need to know your audience to attract a sales agent, to attract whatever it is you're trying to do. You need to know your audience from a very authentic place. As an artist, as a business person, as get advisors, get marketers, get folks to help you identify who that audience is and to grow it before you shoot your first shot.